Okay, hi again. So continuing with our talk about a little bit more of JavaScript. So basically I want to talk about JavaScript modules. Again, in a nutshell, for this class you have to use ESM modules, okay? And if you want to find more information and documentation for that, make sure to just search for MDN JavaScript modules, and that will take you to this page, JavaScript modules. And then in here, like I strongly recommend you to go and read through all of these things so you can understand what's happening, okay? The whole idea is that you can use this idea of export and then import, so we're going to use that in our application. In a nutshell, it is very important also to understand a little bit, understand the history of where the modules are coming from. There actually were like many different ways of creating modules in JavaScript until the people from ECMA, the ECMA standard decided to unify it in JavaScript. And even though not everyone is doing it right now, it is kind of advised for everyone. And I kind of see a transition where people like the people I really admire in JavaScript are all trying to switch for that. So I strongly recommend you to learn it like that. So do not use CGS or AMD or UMD or even the one that is default in Node.js. Instead, we are going to be using ESM or ES modules, okay? So how does that work? So I was telling you in the previous video that you can create like a very basic module just by doing like something like this and then just returning that me object. That me object is going to be basically whatever default or whatever public things you want to make. So you just make them an attribute of that me object, okay? Now, if I want to do that for my San Francisco listings, let's say that I want to create like a module for the listings and then another module for like the main element. So what I'm going to do in here is that I'm going to create like my listings and I'm going to save it as a variable in here. And then I'm just going to initialize a listings module. However, I haven't created that module. So let me go and open a new file in here. And I'm going to save it as listings.javascript in the same folder where we have the main.js. Notice that I'm using like a capital L because this is going to be only like a module. And then that means that is kind of like a constructor. And all technically it is not exactly that. And then you can go and create it exactly the same way. You can call it me as well. It doesn't have to be the word me. Like you can go and say this is a listing, for instance. And then I can just go and return the listing in here, okay? Now, in order for me to be able to use this, then I need to export, if I know how to write. And for the moment, I'm going to use the export default, okay? And as you can see, ESLint is complaining in here. And then what I want to do for me to be able to use that in here, notice that I have the two files next to each other, is that I need to import the listings. And then Copilot just woke up, so let me give it more time to sleep so it doesn't disturb us for the moment. But yes, I think it might have been just VS Code auto-completing in there. So basically what I'm doing in there is that I'm importing the listings module from the listings file, which is in here. You can also do it directly like that, and I see like VS Code and React and many people doing it like that. I feel like I usually like giving it like the full name so it doesn't really create any errors in case that is not finding exactly the same file. And then as you can see, it's also complaining because it's not using that in here. And then let's just add like console log listings initialized. And then something else that I recommend you is that whenever you're creating these things for debugging purposes, it's usually a good idea. Oh, if I can find the thumbs up. There we go. I'm not sure if it is a good idea. I just like it because it helps me debugging. I can find the emojis more easily in the console than doing the other way, or just with text. And then if I want to make that listings directly available outside here, I can do it like this. Another way that you can do it is that instead of creating the variable right away and assuming that I'm only going to be using it in there, then I just put it like this. And then I have to change the configuration here. Let me change the settings, and it's fine if I can find indentation. I think it seems like it's using controls indentation in pixels. It's not in pixels, I want it in spaces. Can it be like tabs? There we go, tab size. Let me go, I think I'm using 2, and that's why it's getting like something else. There we go, I think now it's fixed, hopefully. Okay, so if you do it like this, right away I'm just creating it as an attribute, and that still works. Now, if I go and try to use that in here, then I get this error. And the reason why I get that error is because of the history. So JavaScript was created in a rush, in a way. And then because of that, it didn't really support right away any modules, especially because it was designed only to be for being creating short scripts that will run directly in the browser. And then if you just wanted to use a different module, you just imported a different script. And then people started thinking like, yeah, let's just make everything global variables. And it was a nightmare when you started creating larger things, especially when Google released the V8 engine. I think that was in the years 2000 and something, maybe. Like around 2000 and, when should have that been? Like, well, we can search. Google V8 release year. I'm guessing it has to be around, it could be before 2008 or something like that. Oh, look at that, exactly in 2008. Yes, when I started my PhD. So what happened with V8 is that JavaScript became extremely fast, and then people started building larger things, and because of larger things, is larger code bases. Then people also started using Node.js, the people from Node, it was running JavaScript in the server, and because it's running in the server, the code bases were going to be even larger. So, and the thing with Node.js is that they say since it's going to be larger, then we are going to create a way of importing modules. And that was kind of a standard, but the web never really caught up with that. And then for the web, there were many other ways of loading modules. Then, as I said before, the people from the ECMA standard decided to create their own version. And now, if you want to do that, those are going to be the ES6 modules that we are using, which is going to be the export and then the import. But if you want to use that in here, then it is very important that when you load your scripts, then you go and say, this is going to be of type module. And this is going to hopefully be interesting later when we reuse it in another place, okay? So every time you want to use like scripts with ES6 modules, and this is very nice because then you can load things dynamically from CDNs and things like that inside the application. It helps a little bit. And now you can see that this thing is working, okay? Good. So having done that, let me come in here into my listings and then start doing something with this. So what I want to do is that I want to take that form that we have in there, this form, and then I want to start doing something with it. So if I take a look at the form, then you can see that I have that form in there, and I want to select that form directly from my JavaScript code. So basically, for that, I need to give it an ID or some other way in which I can identify it. For the moment, it's the only one we have, but it's not a good practice to do it like that. And then for some reason in this code, I didn't have the action, which is going to be executed when the thing gets, like when I run that. So if I just leave things like that, notice that the action, it's kind of like the URL that this form is going to be visiting once it is completed. So if I enter some things in there, please notice that is going to be sending that to this place, okay? And then you can see it's kind of like in the same one. I wonder, I think it's basically the same if I just do that. Yes, so, and then let me try clearing up the URL in here. There we go, and then clear that. And then if I do that, then you can see that it's actually reloading the page and it's sending that into the URL. And that is going to be important in a second. So what I want to do in here is that I want to access that form. So if I want to do that, I'm going to create a variable. I'm actually going to call it form because I'm already into the listings, so I don't have to worry that much. And then I'm going to use the DOM API, which is only available in the browser. And you can do one of two things. The most common one that you can do, or that you will going to see, is something like this, which is saying, please find an element and return an element. If you want to see that element, just go and search for MDN JavaScript element, okay? And this is going to take you to exactly what is the object that is going to be returned, or the type of object. And in here, since I'm doing it by ID, the only thing I have to provide is what is the specific ID. Notice that I'm not using hashtag or anything. And then if I come in here, then I can just go and say, just for debugging, form loaded. And then I can just pass in here. Here is the form that I'm going to be using. And then you can see that this is of type form. And when I hover over these elements, you can see that it's actually pointing to the HTML element. So it's basically the same than just like right-clicking in here and say inspect. And this is going to be useful because that means that I can do stuff with that. For instance, one of the things I can do is that I can say, whenever in this form there is an event, which is going to be the event submit. I want you to run the handler, which I'm going to create in a second, called, let's call it, like, I guess, on create form or in create listing, or I can call it on create because I'm already into listings. And then as you can see, ESLint is telling me that it doesn't exist yet. So I can go and create it. And let's go and use the expression type of functions this time. Because of that, it has to be before. And then I can just go and say I'm going to create an anonymous function. And when I'm in here, what I want to do is a console log that says something like creating listing. And again, let's go, do we have something that says like create, like baby. Let's go and put like a little chicken here. So again, this is going to be useful because if I run that, I don't know if you notice what happened. You see that it disappeared right away. The reason for that is because of that default behavior that the forms have. When, like actually we are going to use that in the second project, but for the moment in HTML, we can use something that is called Ajax, which is going to be, or JavaScript rather, that is going to be modify the page right away without actually refreshing the page. So for us to do that, this onCreate function, which by the way, typical question, think about this for a second. In what line am I running the onCreate function? So I'm creating the function in here, and you can see that I also have the function in here. So in what line am I running that function? Think for a second. And pause the video if you want. You got it? Okay, so how do I call that function? Well, for calling the function, it will be something like this, right? But I am not doing that. I'm instead just doing this. So if I do that, remember that I can just go and put this into another variable. And then if I want later, I can go and just call that function, which is very similar to what we did in the exporting part in the previous video. So in this case, basically what I'm saying, like the answer to my question is, I am not calling the onCreate function. I am passing the onCreate function to the addEventListener method, such that it actually gets called by the browser whenever the form is being submitted. No? In any case, so I am just passing the function. And usually what you're going to see is that, like many people will actually just put that in here. And when you put it in there, it's actually better just to put it like something like this. But just for pedagogical reasons, let's just go and put it in here, which can also be a little bit more organized. And then we can just call here the onCreate. Does that make sense? Okay. So having done that, as I was saying, like this thing, it's not showing my little chicken in there. So for that, what I'm going to do is that every time you call the addEventListener, and again, if you want to find more information about that, search for MDN, JavaScript, and addEventListener. And in this method, you're going to find all of the documentation for that, and then you can see what is the type of event, and you can find here all of the different types of events you can listen for. In this case, for instance, for form, these are the events triggered for that, and here it is. You can do a submit. I didn't know you can do an event listener for reset, and then form data. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I didn't know that one was also a form event. Okay, so the other one, typical ones, is like somebody clicks on something. You can do things on animations, clipboards, databases, a ton of things. Okay, so you can go and read more about that. Now, yes, the other part is going to be the listener, and the listener is going to receive a notification which implements the event interface. And if you want to see what the event interface has, here is the whole documentation for that. You can do all of that. And so basically what that means is that this function in here is going to receive a notification, which is going to be implementing the event. So it's going to be a variable. And then the typical thing that you're going to be doing, and then Copilot just woke up, so I'm going to let it complete, is going to be calling this prevent default. Okay, good work, Copilot. What that prevent default does is that it actually stops the browser from stops the default submit behavior, okay, which is to refresh. I don't want it to refresh. So when I do that, if I come in here and I just click, then you can see my chicks are actually showing up in there, and then I can create them. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Okay, now I am creating this not just for printing that, instead, and then Copilot is guessing, probably because I've been doing this for a while in these classes, but I like exactly what it is doing in there. So basically what I want to do is that I want to extract the form that I like the data that it's in the form. For that, one way of doing that is doing exactly what Copilot is doing in there. And then I'm using this form data constructor. The form data constructor takes as a parameter a form element. But how do I get the form element? I get it like this. Oh, but in this method, do I have a form variable? I don't. But since this method, it's inside the other one, it's the form element, it's actually within the scope of this. So I actually have access to that. It's kind of like a global variable, but at least in this scope. Like under the scope of the listings, I have access to all of them. So it's kind of like using classes in Java, and you can also do classes in JavaScript if you want. I just find them like just too much things to write. So I prefer like this one because I think it's way more dynamic. In any case, I do have access to that form, which gives me access to this. And then Copilot wants to get each one of the elements individually, but instead of that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create like a listing, and then Copilot again is completing that. So basically this is going to get me those entries. So if you want to see what that is doing, like there's many tricks that you can do. Actually, let me show you one of those. You can just go and put a debugger in here in the JavaScript, and when you put that in here, if you have your sources open and you make sure that you have things that says that you're not pausing for, like this one in here especially. If this is disabled, then it will not stop. But then if I just refresh and I click on that, it's going to stop at that point. And the good news is that then I can press escape, which is going to show me the console, and then close that one. And then I can access all of the variables that are created all the way to that point, which is extremely useful. I can just go and say, show me what is in the form data, and then it has this thing. And then I can go and say, can you get me what is the title? I think that's what Copilot was saying before. Get me what is the price. Actually, I think it's called price here. There we go. Yes. And by the way, how do I know that it's capital P? Because if you come in here, very important, whenever you create your forms, you have to make sure that all the inputs that you have in your forms, they are going to have like these name attributes. And whatever you put in there is going to be the name of the attribute of the object in the form data. So I actually have an error in here. This actually should be price, lowercase p, and this is going to be description, lowercase d, okay? So when we do that, then that is going to change it for that, so I can go and refresh in here, and then do that again. Actually, let me execute this again, but after putting like values in there. And if I do that, and then I go and I show the form data again for the title, then you can see whatever values in there. Does that make sense? Okay. So having done that, now the thing is I want to do something with that, okay? Which is, in this case, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say, let's create another function, which I'm going to call append listing, and then Copilot already knows what I want to do. Yes, sure, I will put that one in there, and then should we put something for adding? Yes, so an emoji. Again, if you see, I find it easier to find these emojis than doing other things in there. And basically what I'm going to do then is just add, or I say the append listing, and then I just pass that object. And Copilot is also suggesting that we put the form reset in there. By the way, in case you don't know, when I say Copilot, this is an extension, it's from GitHub, it's kind of like my recommended way of just doing an initial exploration of coding with AI. It has like pros and cons, but you can just enable it by, you can create an academic account and then install the GitHub Copilot extension. It should be quite straightforward. If you have issues with that, do let us know in Slack, okay? So now that I have done that, let me, and then of course I closed a lot of things. I think I removed the debugger, so then I can go and just put things in here. And then when I do that, then you can see that it's trying to append that listing, okay? So, having done that, then how do I actually append the listing? Well, there is multiple things we can do. The very first one is that this is easier to see. Let me collapse all the way to, and of course, I'm switching, there we go. I wanted to make it smaller, and then there we go. So if I come here into my main, and then these are all my listings, I'm going to just delete these ones in here. So I just have one, so you can see the results. And then what I want to do is that I'm going to create another variable, and I'm going to do it here in the top level of my module, so everyone can access that. And I'm going to call it like listings container. And yeah, I actually like what Copilot is saying in there. However, this thing doesn't exist yet. So remember, if you're using like generative AI, make sure that you completely understand what it is being generated. And then in this case, I do have my listings in here. And this is one of the listings, and I have a class listings, but then this one is going to be basically what I'm going to use for that. I'm going to move this H2 to the top, so this thing only has the listings. And then what I'm going to do in here is that when I'm appending this thing, I can go and say something like, take my listings container, and then I'm going to take my inner HTML, which is an attribute from any element. Again, if you want to find what are the attributes that you can do in there, like put a debugger and then just explore in the console, or even better, you can just go and find what this is in there, like in the Mozilla Developer Network, and you're going to find all the specific documentation. For instance, if you want to find MDN inner HTML, then this tells you in the element there is an inner HTML. Be very careful whatever you pass in there. It can be dangerous, especially for injections. So there's multiple things that you can read about that. But this is just for simplicity. In any case, what I'm going to say in here is like, I'm going to put a text in there that says what. And then if I have that, remember that listings, it's actually containing this right now. And if I run that, I am getting a getElement by ID like an error. Let me make sure that everything is properly saved. This one is telling me that this getElement by ID is not a function. And then of course, it is very important that you spell things correctly. Oh, I wonder why I deleted that one. It's actually the other one. I was about to blame Copilot, but it's actually my error somehow. And if I do this, then you can see this thing disappears. So that is modifying the HTML dynamically with JavaScript, right? And now you can be cool in Paris, no? Okay, so basically what we want to do though is that what I can do is like, what if instead of deleting the whole thing, what I do is what Copilot is suggesting in there. I'm going to create a div, and then what I'm going to do for that is that I'm going to kind of cheat in this way. This is going to be basically the HTML that we had as an example that we created manually, right? So we have this HTML, okay? And as you can see, that HTML starts with a div. So if you want to create a div in using the DOM, then you can use this document create element div. And then I can go and say that that div is going to have a class name, I think is the attribute. And as you can see, this is going to be the class that I want to add, which is basically that. That's what Copilot is saying that. And then I'm going to say in the listings container, I want to append a child, which is going to be the div that I just created. Okay. So, and then I can also go and change that the inner HTML for that is going to be new baby. Okay, and like for the moment, let me go with that one. This is going to give me errors. Prettier is angry at me because what the heck is all of that code? Going to comment that out. Sorry, Prettier. And then when I do that, if I refresh in here and then I send things, yeah. So now I have a new one, and then I can go and say another one. Okay. If you want to go and add something, you can like from the actual listing, then Copilot is doing a good thing in there. So it is actually saying if you put this in here, and that's why I was using back quotes, okay, basically, and then like let's use double wrap in here. So now this is going to get inserted in this literal template, and then whatever you put in here, when I insert that is going to be there, like John or whatever, then it's going to show up in here. Does that make sense? Okay. So now that you have that, and now it kind of becomes obvious why I copied all of that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be lazy. Just remove this from here. I'm going to put that in there. And then hopefully it seems like pretty is fine. And if I add this, then you can see that it starts adding the different elements. It's kind of like creating like another inner one. So that's why we probably want to get rid of this div, although those small ones were kind of cute. Okay, if I do that now, it looks very similar, and then I can go and just start removing and replacing the parts that are going to contain our attributes. And then remember, I added that on this back quote, so that way I can do multiple lines, and then I can just insert in here like the listings image URL. Oh, I like what Copilot is doing in there. Yes, but you know what? I'm going to do something better, even better. So I could go and just put in here. I wonder if that will be something. Yes, it's broken. Yeah, Copilot just hallucinated in there. In any case, so let's go and put the title in here. And then that one we have. So we know for sure this is the listing.title. We don't have default values, so let's just go with this. Come on, shut up, Copilot. And then I'm going just to put that in there. And then you can see that whatever I write in here, whatever, it's what is going to be included in there as the title, okay? And you can repeat the same thing with the other ones, like for instance, this is going to be like the listing.price. And remember, this name has to be the same one that we have in the form. Another way we can do this is, and let's see if this works, I can actually do object mapping, I think it's called. I forgot exactly the same name, or object decomposition, I think it is. Remember, just search for MDN/JS object decomposition destructuring. That seems to be, yes, destructuring. And then what I want to do is for objects, it's pretty much something like this. So what I'm going to say is that I'm expecting to get a title, I'm expecting to get a price, I'm expecting to get a description. So I am not going to have the listing anymore, but now I can go and just do this, okay? And then apart from that, I can also go and say, for instance, if you don't give me a default description, no description or something like that, and that could be like a default value, and that's giving me an error because I'm not using it, but then I can just, beautiful, that's good work, Copilot, and there's actually no need to add all of that extra space in there, so I can just put it like this, and then of course I close the wrong one. If I do this, then I put 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it adds it in there, okay? So the other option, I wonder if I do like another one like this, then it is completely open and it's not including that in there. Like, well, I mean, the other thing is that, yeah, like either even if I don't pass a description in here, it still is going to go with the empty string, which is technically not undefined. But like, if you want to see here, like the host, and let me see if I can just do that like this. Although I think I need an extra thing, I'm going to check. I'm just going to pass that in there, and then say this is my host, okay? And then let's actually go and say that is John, just to see if it is kind of working. And if I create that, now you can see that it's passing that. So that is kind of like the default value that you're passing in there. As a recipe, I recommend you doing this thing, which is saying that by default, I am assuming that I'm not going to receive any objects, okay? And if not, then you just initialize these. But if you receive any, then check if it has any of these attributes. And if you don't have one of those, then you just use the default values in here, okay? So with that, I think you have enough to go and play with these things. You can go and try to see if you can load the other elements. And just like another interesting exercise will be just loading all of the listings from the JSON file and then using something similar to this for you to actually render them all together in there. Make sense? You can use the fetch API for them. With that, actually, let me just stop this in here and then do a git status. I'm going to add the GS listings and then a little comment in there, adding basic JavaScript for creating listings. And then I can do a git push. Hopefully I'm in the correct branch because I was, of course, I'm in the wrong branch. Well, this is the one that is production. So let me actually go and switch here. Main. And then in there, I'm going to pull from origin production. Did I do a git push? Yes. Oh, I hope I pushed. Oh, I pushed to production. Yes, because I was in production. Now I'm doing a pull from production. So this should get me the latest version. And remember, this is in this one, I think it is in here. Airbnb demo page 3. If I refresh this thing in here, that still doesn't have it. Git commit merging production into main, which actually I should have done the other way around, so please forgive me. And then I push that, and there we go. So now it's the latest one, and it should also be deployed. By the way, this is what I did during the office hours, is deploying the GitHub pages. I just enabled that, which gives me this URL. And since now I have that URL, I can come in here. Is that done outside? So if I come in here, oh, interesting. It actually chose 2 deployments. And why 2 deployments? Huh. Oh, that is nice. Very interesting. In any case, now I should be able, yeah, perfect. So we have that part in there, okay?